Well, today on the Family Answer Man, we are answering your questions about parenting kids who are struggling from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man program. This is David Orgis, and I am here with Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man himself. This time is designed to answer questions that are commonly asked both in the counseling and church settings. And our goal is to answer questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years of experience and education to help you, our listeners, have a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Now, we want to thank today the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas. Days Smokehouse is located at 35770 LA Highway 16 in Denham Springs, Louisiana. Now, the Family Answer Man is not a therapy session, and this is not specific advice to your situations. Mental health is a very serious issue, and family dynamics can be and often are very complicated. So, for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. We hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man, though, will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Well, Dr. Mark, we have some big questions today.
Yes.
They all revolve around, or both of them revolve around parenting kids and children and teenagers that are in difficult situations.
Yeah.
How often do you find yourself in a situation where you're discussing with people big, controversial, heavy topics that for you, I'm assuming it's pretty normal and natural, but I think for a lot of people probably is a really difficult thing?
Yeah, I mean, every day I work with parents that are struggling with their children's problems and concerns. I mean, this is a very difficult time, I'll argue, to raise children for several reasons. Number one, the divorce rate is perhaps the greatest it's been, in the last, 50 to 75 years. Number one. Number two, social media plays a very powerful part in the raising of children, meaning kids are now comparing themselves to everybody, in their neighborhood, their community, their state, around the world, because everybody wants to post their pictures and share what a wonderful life they have, and how come I don't drive the Lexus? How come I don't have, my own, bedroom, my own floor at my house or whatever? Why don't I have, 3 motorcycles or whatever in the garage like my friend down the street? And so the peer pressure and the pressure to perform and the pressure to have what everybody else is having now can be more difficult than ever, and that puts a lot on a kid. There's just a lot happening in the lives of children, and it makes it difficult to raise them.
Well, that's a great point about social media. I grew up and, rewind 20 years ago, 25 years ago for me, longer for you.
Sure.
You had to deal with your neighborhood rat pack, right? Or the kids in your class.
Yeah.
Now it's global competition that you're comparing yourself to for these children.
Exactly. And the thing is, even though we have all this technology and we're more connected to more people, the reality is the connection is only virtual. And the problem with that is we are wired, I will argue, to be in fellowship, to be in a connection that is physical. In other words, you're talking about a long time ago, a land far away when I was growing up. The typical afternoon is we get off the bus, we go in, mom would be there in many cases. She'd have a snack or something like that. And then we'd go out and we'd play softball or baseball or football with our buddies, and we'd play basketball or whatever. And we'd do that until the lights came on.
That's right. You got to be home by the time the street lights come on.
The street lights would come on. We'd be back inside, It's time for dinner. You'd have dinner with your family.
Yeah.
After dinner, there was homework. If you got your homework done in time, you'd watch, whatever was the movie or the show of the week, so to speak. And that was basically a typical afternoon. But in that, there was family dinner. In that, there was your friendships. In that, you were getting exercise. In that, you were outdoors. In that, you were riding your bike. In that, you were, playing, with your friends, football, basketball. You were developing, your athletic skills, if you will. And you develop that camaraderie that for me and for many in my generation lasts till this day. I can call up some friends, that I haven't seen in 40 years, and we'll pick up right where we left off because we had that daily connection, that daily time together, making those memories, honing our athletic skills. And so it was a wonderful time. Whereas today I meet so many parents who say, my kids have no friends. They have friends on social media. Somebody maybe lives in Indiana, but no one they can, go see or go visit or play ball with or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that lack of connection really does something to the mental and emotional health of an adolescent and child.
That is such a great point, that the physical aspect of our lives, it's hard to overstate how important it is to the mental and emotional health of our children and of adults alike. So the first question that we have today comes in, and it is it's a serious topic. It's a heavy topic, but I'm glad we're going to be able to discuss it today. Little context to it says, the question starts, when I was younger, my friend committed suicide. Now my daughter seems to be sad all the time. When should I worry that this is becoming depression or worse? And what else should I look for?
Wow. Yeah, so again, those experiences from our adolescence, especially those experiences that are that traumatic, really do stay with us for the rest of our lives. So concerning her daughter, the rule of thumb simply is this: if sadness lasts for more than 2 weeks, and the thing is, and the reason why we say that is because we all get sad, right?
Right.
We get some bad news. We don't make the grade on our test we thought we should be making. Our boyfriend, girlfriend breaks up, with us, that kind of thing. We're going to be sad. But when sadness continues for more than 2 weeks, then depression is very problematic and very possible because after 2 weeks, that is when it goes from sadness to depression. So that's the first thing to look for. If there's a sadness that continues on, for 2 weeks consecutively, if you will, depression now is on the horizon. Number two, if their mood is changing significantly for more than 2 weeks. In other words, if they were normally a happy child, happy-go-lucky, involved with family and friends, if they were, doing well in school, they're looking forward to, being on the volleyball team, whatever, but all of a sudden that changes. I don't want to play volleyball. I don't want to go out for the team. I don't want to do my homework. I don't want to go to school. I hate everybody. Everybody hates me, kind of thing. And that lasts for more than a couple of weeks. That's a red flag.
So the drastic change is something to cue into.
And so be mindful of that. Thirdly, if there's a change in the grades or the overall academic performance. So in other words, if a child is A-B student and now all of a sudden they're a B-C student or C-D student, or they start failing almost everything, and their teachers are concerned, and the teachers are sending emails to the parent, things aren't looking well, and that lasts for more than 2 or 3 weeks, that too is a major red flag, something to be looking for. The reason why that's so important is because, think about it, school is the vast majority of your child's life.
It's hard. Sometimes you think that, and obviously we have priorities, God, family.
Right.
We have activities that our kids are in, but you're absolutely right. The majority of the time that a kid has of their day that's awake is at school.
Exactly. So because that's such a major part of their life, if it's not going well, if it's causing some concern, if there's a lot of problems there at school, both behaviorally and academically, then that's a red flag. Be looking for that. Fourthly, a sense of low self-esteem or self-worth. In other words, they're always verbalizing how ugly they are. They're always verbalizing how better everyone else is. They're always verbalizing how they're not, up to par with their friends, or they're writing these things out, maybe, in a diary, or maybe just, text messaging or emailing or posting these things. But all of a sudden, I'm the worst one, I'm the ugliest one, no one wants, and be aware of that, and especially if it goes, again, more than 2 weeks. If you're hearing or discovering that there's a lot of bullying going on, or if you're discovering maybe from another parent or from a teacher or someone that there is some promiscuity happening, that too is a definite red flag to be aware of. Look for signs of self-harm. If your child is cutting, if they're binge eating, if they are experimenting with bulimia, trying to lose weight so they can look thinner or whatever, beware of those signs, because again, that is going to lead to something even more harmful. If they're talking about or writing about or mentioning, even in passing, suicide, if they say things like, I just need to die, or no one would miss me if I died, or I just don't want to live anymore, or they post something, Definitely a red flag. So be mindful of that. Don't just brush that off as,
Right.
they're just emotional, they're just, being, temperamental or whatever. That is serious.
It seems like that was the approach for a while. I was like, oh no, they're just doing this to get attention. They're
Right.
just being emotional. That's something that we always take seriously.
Always. When they're stopped, and we said this earlier, but they're stopped being interested in their hobbies or their sports. In other words, if they just love softball, they love volleyball, they love cheering, they love being on the dance team, whatever. And now all of a sudden, nothing. I don't want to do that. Don't want to go there. Don't want to practice. Don't want to be on the travel team. Whatever. Be mindful of that.
Right. And that's not a guarantee that they're depressed. It
No.
could be that they've been burned out on an activity, but it's definitely a good indicator to look out for.
Exactly. If they have a change or a loss of friends, in other words, they've had the same friends since the first grade, and now all of a sudden they're in the 8th grade and they don't talk to any of their old friends that they used to have, growing up. If they have a loss of friends, in other words, those friends aren't calling them anymore. They're not corresponding in any kind of way. Be mindful of that. Number 10, and this is very important for our listening audience, but if they have a loss of spiritual interest, in other words, they used to enjoy youth group, or they used to enjoy, church, or they used to enjoy being a part of the mission team or whatever, or the worship team of the church. Now all of a sudden, I have no interest in that, or maybe now they're diametrically opposed to the things of church. Don't need God in my life anymore. Don't need, the Bible in my life. Don't need the church in my life anymore. There's loss of spiritual interest. That is also something that needs to be unpacked and explored.
Yeah.
When they totally isolate from their family. In other words, they eat in their room, they hang out in their room, they never come out of their room. Again, some kids want and need privacy, no problem.
Right.
Some people love their privacy, got it. But when they break virtually almost all interaction with their family, and isolate themselves from their family. They don't eat at the family dinner table. They don't, spend time with mom and dad, watching a TV show or whatever it may be. They don't go to church on Sunday morning. They are isolated from their family. That is something you have to be very, very careful and cautious of. And also, too, and this may seem a little strange for some, and many may not agree with this one, but when there is a major change in clothing style. Well, now, if all of a sudden that they have been very conservative in their dress, now they become very promiscuous in their dress. If they have a very dark sort of dress code now, whereas before it was pretty vibrant, it was pretty normal, it was pretty culturally acceptable or whatever. Yeah. But now all of a sudden it's very dark in their dress. Be mindful of that.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because a lot of times our kids and our teenagers don't have the verbal capacity to express what they're feeling all the time.
Right.
Dress and apparel is hairstyles as well.
Exactly.
Makeup styles for girls. It is a huge indicator of how they express their emotions. Right. That they can do it, they can get their emotions out, they can express that without being able to verbalize it if they're not able to.
And it also creates a new identity.
Yeah.
Sometimes, now their identity is, instead of my personality, my intellect, my athletic skills, my academic, involvement, no longer is that my identity. Now how I dress, how my body looks, that's my new identity. How I, attract people is now my new identity. And so that's very, very concerning when the apparel of a person begins to drastically change.
Yeah.
4 things that I hear a lot that are often problematic that parents need to be aware of. Again, we've mentioned this briefly, but bullying. Bullying, or now it's often called youth violence, can come in 4 primary ways. There's physical violence, of course, where a kid's being picked on, slapped around, whatever. Verbal violence, so to speak, where they're constantly being put down, shamed. Relational and social violence, where they are being told all sorts of things via social media, embarrassing them, saying things that are harmful, saying things that maybe were to be a secret, and now everybody's hearing about it. Yeah. And then the damage to property, where they break a person's phone, or they break a person's computer, or they steal a person's book bag, or whatever it may be. And then, of course, cyberbullying is that constant threat of what is going to happen. So parents, be mindful that your kid may be involved in some of this, and be willing and ready to, again, address this and help them to solve this problem.
Yeah, you used a phrase a little while ago that some of these things are important to unpack and explore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great phrase to remember. Let's unpack and explore when we see these symptoms.
Right.
Let's explore it with our kids.
And I think sometimes parents, and I know this was true, of my generation, and I know I've seen other parents do this, but sometimes the reason why I think a lot of children shut down is because they don't want to hear a 3-hour lecture. Mm. Okay, well, they don't want to hear a 3-hour lecture,
That's right.
where the parent, constantly repeats themselves. And look, I know I was guilty of that, we've all been
I don't know if
there.
that's a pastor thing, but I relate with you.
We're all guilty of that, but we do that as parents because we're scared too. Because when we get scared, we lecture. And for all the pastors who are out there listening, it comes to your kids, they may not want 4 points in a sermon, they may just want to hear dad, to listen, and dad just to share, and dad to put their arm around them, and dad to say, hey, look, let's work this out together. Tell me what's going on. And so be mindful of that. We'll unpack that some more in a moment. But another thing that we hear a lot about is sexual violence, primarily towards girls, but it also happens to boys. Mm-hmm. So we need to be mindful of that as well. Sometimes it's very difficult for a girl to reveal that to a parent.
Right. There's a lot of shame that comes.
There's a lot of shame there,
that.
And sometimes the parent doesn't want to believe them.
Yeah,
and that complicates things even further. Mm-hmm. Substance abuse, something that we don't hear much about, but a diagnosis of alcohol dependence for a teenager has a suicide rate 10 times higher than the norm.
Wow.
I'll say that again. A diagnosis of alcohol dependence as a teenager has a suicide rate that's 10 times higher.
That is crazy.
Yes. So again, be careful, be mindful of that. Social media is another area of concern. Studies show that, hear this, that the more time you spend on social media platforms, the higher rate of depression. And the depression and suicide rate has risen since the usage of smartphones.
So there's a direct, quantifiable correlation between the time that's spent on social media and depression. Wow.
For the reason we just mentioned at the beginning of the show. Number one, you're comparing yourself to everybody around you. Everybody has more, does more, gets to do more, et cetera, than you do. That's depressing for a lot of kids. Number two, the child is not getting the physical and relational connection and that they need. Yeah. The physical relational connection, again, being outside, riding bikes, playing ball, going to the gym, whatever it may be, some sort of interaction that, again, gives your body and your mind and your relationship a chance to grow and to learn and to just really experience, life, so to speak. Yeah. So that's very important to do. So what to do? That's the big question that parents are asking. So what do we do? Some of this may be very quote unquote common sense, but sometimes the basics are the best things to go back to. So number one, know your child. What I mean by that is this. If you're going to be really honest as parents, the research indicates that on average, in an average week of 168 hours, most parents on the high side may spend a total of 2 hours of quality interactive times with their child.
Wow, that's on the
high side. That's on the high side. A total of 2 hours of quality time, not just, hey, they passed by the hall, not just, we said good morning, as they're going off to school, but actually interacting with their child. So number one, know your child.
Wow.
Number two, if you are discovering or sensing that some of these things are happening that you're concerned about, again, the bullying, the concerns maybe with substance abuse or whatever it may be, or the depression or the sadness, have a conversation with your child. Have many conversations. The research indicates that most adolescents are willing to open up if they know that their parent is sincere and sympathetic with where they're with their situation.
And that can be difficult. Right. But it's critical.
Yeah, sincere and sympathetic with where they are. Again, your adolescent doesn't want a 3-hour lecture. Okay, they don't want 4 points in a poem. They want an interacting time with their mom, with their dad, with their parents that is sympathetic and that's sincere. So again, number 3, very similar to number 1, create a relationship. In other words, get into their world.
Yeah.
If they play volleyball, if they love, collecting baseball cards, if they love Xbox, they love Madden football, whatever it may be, but get in their world, and help them to see, that you are interested in what they're doing, where they are, etc. Next, be willing to make a major change for your family. In other words, if your child is being bullied on the bus, you may have to make a change in bringing your child to school or creating some other mode of transportation. If your child is being bullied at school and you've gone through everything, you've talked to the administration, you've talked to the teachers, you've talked to everyone, and there's still nothing changing, you may have to reconsider maybe a private school, or you may have to consider maybe homeschooling. But be willing to make a change for the sake of your child, because your child may be on the brink and may need some relief, and this may be the only relief in sight.
And it doesn't matter how inconvenient it is, your child is more important than that inconvenience.
Exactly. Next, family counseling is always a wise option. Sometimes it's good just to create a space or have a person that can professionally and sympathetically be involved in what's happening in the family dynamic.
Just real quick, if somebody says, family counseling, and they want to have a small picture of what that looks like, 30-second synopsis, if they walk into your office.
Yeah, what that would look like is this: mom, dad, and say teenager. And basically, the first thing you want to basically look at, like anything else, is, so what's going on? And what do we want to accomplish? What's going on and where do we want to land? What's going on and what path do we want to get on that may be helpful? And so sometimes, you may have to encourage the dad to maybe get more involved in his daughter's life or son's life. Sometimes you may have to encourage the mom to maybe do more of this and less of that. You may want to encourage the adolescent to here's some options you might want to rethink. And so it's basically trying to restructure the dynamic. Or maybe mom and dad are having a lot of concerns, and maybe mom and dad aren't getting along, and maybe there's a lot of, and the child is trying to, navigate that, or the child is trying to be the referee, or the child's, getting caught up in the crossfire of mom and dad, and so maybe mom and dad need to restructure some things. Mom and dad often are the architects of the family, atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they may be mindful, or need to be mindful or made aware, if you will, of what they're doing and how their behavior is impacting the behavior of their child. Smaller children, even teenagers, are often a reflection of their parents.
And that's scary for a lot.
It is very scary, but it's a reality.
Yep.
They often reflect the mood, the dynamic, the concerns, the problems the parents are struggling with. If the parents have a alcohol problem or a substance abuse problem or a work problem, they need to be maybe reminded of how they can get better in those areas so their child can have a safer, happier, healthier home.
So this is a great time for everyone when you think about your kids.
That's right.
And you're not in control of their emotions. You're only in control of your emotions.
Exactly.
But they often are a reflection. So that's a good indicator for us if we see some changes or we see behaviors that we don't like in our kids to also evaluate where we are. And
Exactly. I think one of the problems is that a parent sees counseling in what is called the medical model. What I mean by that is, the medical model is, my child is not doing well, take him to the doctor and let the doctor fix him.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
That's the medical model. My child's not doing well, take him to the counselor. But family therapy basically is a systems approach.
Yeah.
If the child is having a problem, that means the entire system has a problem. And so the whole system has to be fixed. And that may include mom doing things differently, dad doing things differently, mom and dad interacting maybe differently, mom, dad interacting differently with the child, maybe the child interacting differently with mom and dad. If the child is being enabled, or if the child is pulling down all the power, there's a problem there.
Yeah.
If dad has a substance abuse problem, if mom, is abusing prescription meds or whatever it may be, how do we restructure that so that the home and the system is happier and healthier?
Right. Happier, healthier home right there.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed.
The last thing I would say is keep your pastor, perhaps, or your youth pastor in the loop as to what's going on so that they can be a professional and spiritual voice in the life of the child.
Yeah, that's. I will say this. Dr. Ross from Southwest Seminary did a big study, longitudinal study over several decades, and what they came to find out was that every child needs 5 important adults in their life, positive influences in addition to their parents.
Exactly.
And, that's the whole, it takes a village to raise a child, because the more that you have an intact, healthy, happy family with additional resources, a children's pastor, student pastor, the senior pastor of your church, coaches, teachers, those types of
School
adult relationships, are so critical in being your reinforcements.
Right. So the point is, the more, the more adults that you trust and that you believe in, that can be a part of your child's life, the better everyone's going to be.
Yeah.
And so, again, if it's a pastor, if it's a youth pastor, if it's a coach, if it's a school counselor, if it's the kid's karate instructor or piano teacher or jujitsu instructor, whoever it may be, but someone that kid respects and looks up to, maybe they can speak into their life as well. Yeah. And speaking into their life may make the difference in many, many ways.
And is often really encouraging for parents, because what you will most often find is that the values that you want your kids to have, those people, if they're good influences, are going to reinforce those values without you saying, hey, could you really please teach my kid this? A coach is going to step in and they're going to teach a school counselor, a piano teacher. They're going to be able to step in and they're going to reinforce the same values that you want your kid learning.
That's exactly right. And then the thing is that, again, we've all said this, we've all done this. We've all experienced this, and that is, that coach or that school counselor or that piano teacher or that youth pastor may say the exact same thing to your child that you just said, 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
But because they said it, it's gospel. It works. It makes sense. Real quickly, there are 4 things that the World Health Organization has researched that we need to be very careful of and mindful of concerning our children.
Okay.
Number 1 in 7 of all children between the ages of 10 to 19 will be diagnosed with a mental disorder.
Wow.
1 in 7 of kids 10 to 19. That means depression, that could be general anxiety, etc. But again, 1 in 7 between the ages of 10 and 19. Number 2, depression is the leading cause of illness among adolescents. Depression is the leading cause of illness among adolescents. So again, dealing with depression may help take care of other problems, both emotionally and physically in the life of your adolescent. Number 3, suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 19-year-olds.
Wow.
Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among those between 15 and 19. And finally, number 4, failing to address adolescent mental conditions will extend those conditions into adulthood. In other words, you don't just outgrow it as you become an adult.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's going to limit the opportunities for that person to lead a fulfilled life as an adult. So the sooner you tackle it, the sooner you address it, the sooner you treat it, the sooner you manage it as an adolescent or child, the better off that person is going to be.
So early intervention is key, and there are lots of ways that you can really breathe life into the lives of your children. So we want to say thank you for joining us today on the Family Answer Man. We want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse, and especially Meat for underwriting today's show. As a reminder, this is not a therapy session, and we can't give specific advice to your situation, but we do believe that mental health is very serious, that family dynamics it's a system, and they can be addressed. So we want to encourage you to seek professional help where you can for your circumstances. But we do hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man has been helpful to you. You can get in touch with us at familyanswerman@liveoak.church for your questions. And as always, we hope that this will lead you to have a stronger, healthier, and happier family.